Hello and welcome to Alive and Composing the Wonderful World of Innova with today's guest, Jerome Kitzke. Would you please state your name for the record?
Jerome Kitzke.
Oh, it's like you've done that all your life. Now, we have a longitudinal survey of Innova artists and the pets they have at home. Are you a pet owner?
I am not.
Is that because you hate them, and you hate all animal world, or because you're transient, you're moving around, you just don't have the lifestyle to have one?
Yeah, the lifestyle. I'm away far too often to have a pet, or even plants for that matter.
Wow, the vegetable world is missing out on your love too. So you're a wandering person. Where do you call home?
New York City, Manhattan.
Where are you off to in the next couple of days?
I'm making an annual visit that I do every June to the Pine Ridge Reservation to visit friends I've made there over the last 25 years.
And how do you balance these two lifestyles out, the urban and the reservation?
Oh, I'm not really at the reservation that often, so I can't really answer a question in I think the manner you intend, but I'm pretty much I am where I am kind of person, so right now I'm here with you.
Are there energies that carry you with you wherever you go? How are you like your music?
How am I like my music? Oh, that's a great question. I've never even thought of such a thing. Question. Well, I'm like my music in that I like to tell stories. I'm not a storyteller by profession, but I like to hear stories and tell stories, and I think our lives are made up of an infinite number of stories as we go through life, and my music tends to be story-oriented. So that would be my answer.
Good answer too, because a lot of what I hear is what I see. It's kind of lyrical and full of beans, and full of life kind of music that moves from one stage to the other, and it really has an arc, kind of like a narrative.
And I hope the music reflects the fact that life is full of incredible variety of emotions, high and low, and I have no trouble with that aspect of life. That's just part of the deal, so to speak, and I find that the ups and downs all combine in a way that I think then comes out through the music in a powerful way, I hope.
Cast your mind back to your earliest sound memory. What would that be?
Probably I was 3 years old and I was crying because one of my siblings, it's not been determined who, pushed me into a table, and I got a little cut in the corner of my eye and had to get stitches, and I remember it was not pleasant, and my father was buckling up my little coat, the sounds of the metal buckle on my little orange blue checkered coat as we were making our way to the hospital. It's not music, but it's music.
Oh, but there's a great story right there. I hadn't even counted on that.
I was 3, 1958. In fact, that memory became very potent to me recently because both of my parents died in the last 15 months, and we're now in the process of emptying out the homestead, the boyhood home and their home, and I recalled that story quite powerfully when I was in the process of doing that when I was there, as many stories came out of that process of emptying out their house, and it was quite touching and sad and uplifting all at the same time.
Cast your mind back again to, was there a moment when you witnessed a work of art, whatever medium it might be, that really kind of changed your life and thought, I can be a composer too?
Oh, this is pretty standard answer for many people of my generation, but February 9th, 1964, the Beatles on Ed Sullivan. I recall watching that. I was 9 years old. Recall watching that with my family because we watched Ed Sullivan, which was a great show actually for seeing a lot of the great rock and roll bands of the time. And I thought, wow, man, that is something else. So then, of course, I, as millions of young people did at the time, wanted to be in a rock band. So I was 9. By the time I was 13, I had my Farfisa combo compact organ and my Chet Atkins Gretsch amplifier. And I was in a rock band with 4 other kids who didn't know how to play their instruments either, which was pretty standard and typical and wonderful, and we all learned at the same time. I taught myself keyboard and piano and organ, and I wanted a Hammond B3 and a Leslie. I always did, and I still do, and I now live in New York where I don't really have room for such a thing. But someday, sometime in my life, I'd like to have space where I could get that Hammond B3 finally. I have written for the instrument, though, quite recently.
And what happened next? So you're in a band. How did you get from there to here, musically speaking?
Well, 68 through 72, I played in this rock and roll band, and in 72, I was a junior in high school, and coming close to the time of, well, what do you want to do with your life? But just actually prior to that, in 1970, I had an English teacher, Mary Johnson. We were reading John Steinbeck's The Pearl, and she was walking around the class saying, well, I'd like to approach our analysis of this book in a different way. I would like some of you to write musical themes based on some of the human dramatic themes in the novel. And she's going around from here to here, and she comes to my desk, and I was called Jerry at the time. Changing from Jerome to Jerry was pretty common. And she said, Jerry, I'd like you to do some as well, write some musical themes. And I remember looking at her and saying, well, Miss Johnson, I don't write music. What are you talking about? I think she knew I played French horn badly in the high school band and orchestra, and that I was in a rock band. So she somehow translated those facts into the possibility that I could actually write some music. And I said, well, okay, I'll give it a shot. So I did give it a shot, and found through that process, being pricked to that thinking process about being a composer by this English teacher, I found that I actually had some skills in the area, which I had no idea about. So I ended up writing 3 little piano pieces that I still play to this day as a way to touch base with that part of my life, and that's now 43 years ago. So after those pieces, I thought, oh, I think I could try being a composer. So I looked into the local college. I had to decide where I was going. I decided to stay in Milwaukee and go to the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, where I studied music theory and composition, and the composer there was John Downey, a wonderful man who's now been dead since 2004. But he saw something in me too. He wasn't quite sure what it was, but he was a great teacher, like many great teachers who let students sort of be who they are, as opposed to trying to form them into something they think they should be. He let me go my way, and I started to learn things that I didn't know before, of course. I had been writing music for 5 years in score form before I had my first lesson with him, but I didn't really know what I was doing. For instance, I wrote a piece for chamber orchestra, a soprano solo, and I wrote the parts first. I remember being on the stage in my high school on this 9-foot Boisendorfer grand piano, and all over the floor of the stage were all these various pages and parts. So in my mind, I write the parts first, and then I wrote a score out. Well, of course, that was ass backwards, and but that's how I taught myself, and then I started to get schooled in some of the more efficient and proper ways of doing certain things, and here I am.
But what are some of the pearls of wisdom that, if you were a teacher, you would pass on? I guess number one would be write the score first and then make the parts. But do you have any other ideas to share to the next generation of students?
Yeah, I always think write what you hear and write what you'd like to write, and not what anybody else thinks you should be doing, whether it's pressures from the culture itself, or a teacher, or trends of the time, any of that. I've always I can only write what I hear. I write what I hear in my head. I'm an inner ear composer, and maybe that's why I haven't participated in as a creative person in any of the isms of the time. And I have nothing against the isms. There's fantastic music in all the isms, great creative minds and people working in those areas. But what I hear in my mind has never been attached to any of those kinds of processes. So I would just suggest for being true to oneself and writing what you hear.
Is there a kind of spiritual practice to your composing or your life too?
I just try to. I'm a day-to-day living person. I'm, and that has some practical drawbacks to it sometimes. But I am trying to live each day with a certain sort of manner of being a good human being in the culture I live in, and the society and the community I live in, and to have my eyes and ears open all the time, and to be an open-minded person. And I think that has allowed me, everywhere I've gone, to absorb a lot of different things, not just musical things, but cultural things, and absorb them in a way that I think eventually then manifests in the music I write.
What's your greatest fear?
I don't feel any, really. I'm trying to think back to when I actually felt any kind of fear with any sort of consistent basis, and I really can't recall any. I'm not saying there aren't any. They just don't. It's not the way I think about living life in terms of examining the fears and whatnot. The other day I was sitting on a porch here in St. Paul, and there was the hugest, loudest clap of thunder I've ever heard in my life. Felt like it was going to explode the house, and that's not fear. That was, I got temporarily frightened, and but it was magnificent, actually. So.
Tell me about American Sunlight and the character of it.
Well, I'm thrilled that I'm able to re-release this CD that first came out on the Koch label in 1999 and was discontinued somewhere in 2007 area, and I've always wanted to have it available again, and I'm thrilled that Innova is going to be putting the record out again, and that it will be available. I still believe in the physical product. The size of the physical product keeps shrinking, but I still am thrilled that you can still hold a CD in your hand, and you can read a booklet, and you can read about the pieces on the CD without having to sit at a computer screen. But the record is, I'm very proud of it. It was put out in 1999, as I said, and Peer Music, my publisher, was the producer of the record, and I worked with fantastic people. Judy Sherman was the producer for 5 of the 7 cuts, and she's magnificent. And for 2 of the other cuts, Guy Klasevic, the accordion player and composer, and myself were producers for the 2 other pieces. And the musicians on the record are ones that at that time I had worked with for about 4 or 5 years. And now, 14 years later, these are people that I work with a lot, and we have great camaraderie together, and artistic and personal, and it's a wonderful experience. The recording of that record was done in very small studios that aren't there anymore in New York City, and I remember fondly, I'd not recorded much music before, so I wasn't familiar with the process, but it was fascinating to watch Judy work with the musicians and ask me my opinion, and then the after part of editing and mixing, she was a wizard at creating certain things out of many pieces, and I found that fascinating. And the record contains 7 works that are pretty much show my breadth of feelings about composition and the subject matter. I'm very text-oriented. The booklet then and now in the new release, re-release of the record is very wordy, I know, and some people, it's too much, but my pieces need some explanation as to where they came from and why I did them. And I'm very, since my first works as a composer were coming out of literature, I think that somehow that's maintained as part of my process over the 43 ensuing years. So I like to write about the pieces I've written and say what they're about and where they came from. And so I think the record holds up well still. And as I said, I'm thrilled that it will be available and out there again.
And how has your musical language evolved since then? Can we look forward to more of your works coming out?
Oh yes, I'm also very excited that I have a record planned for an innova release in hopefully the spring sometime, which will contain 3 works. The one written in 2000 called The Green Automobile, which is an amplified speaking piano piece that I play, with an Allen Ginsberg text of the same name, The Green Automobile, from his Reality Sandwiches collection. And another piece called The Pahasapa Give Back, which is one of the main sections of a large work of the same name, a large theatrical work of the same name written in 1994. This section was written in 1993 as a commission from Essential Music, and it's a piece for 4 drum sets and piano, amplified piano, and 1 large bass drum. And it's one of my few works. I have a reputation as being one of the composers that has Native American themes and influences in my music, and I always find that interesting because I don't hear in my music actual musical influence of Native American culture, but what I think is in my music from Native American culture is the time I've spent in Native American culture and the things I've absorbed and some of the feelings about time and whatnot that gets into the music. But there's not much actual Native American influence, musically speaking. This is one piece, though, the Pahasapa Give Back, that definitely is influenced by Northern Plains drum music. And that piece is a political piece. It's an exhortation to return the Black Hills and portions of the Black Hills to the Lakota, Arapaho, and Cheyenne people vis-a-vis treaties that were made in the 19th century. The final work is a big piece, a 40-minute string quartet, piece for actor, string quartet, and bass drum. And it's an anti-war work, one of 4 I've written in the last, sorry to say, in the last 20 years or more. And it's got 7 poems in it, ranging from Aeschylus to Harold Pinter, Walt Whitman, Rumi, Helen McKay, John Scott, Anonymous. There's a little poem from Anonymous on a World War II latrine wall. And the actor for the piece is Jennifer Catherine Marshall, who's magnificent, and Barbara Merjan is the bass drummer, and Ethel, the great string quartet Ethel, will be doing the honors for that part of the piece. So that record reflects pieces I've written since 2000. 1993 is Pahasapa, but Winter Count, the big string quartet piece, is from 2008. So that'll be coming out in hopefully the spring.
Our ears are wide open, and good luck with all of those. And thanks a lot for talking.
Yeah, thanks, Philip. Thank you.